It is June 10th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's break with the boxing crowd. You've had a few fighters, including Tyson Fury, go public with their belief that Deontay Wilder should hang it up. We saw Wilder lose to Joe Parker. We saw Wilder lose to Zhilei Zhang. The feeling was that Wilder, particularly after the Zhang loss where he gets stopped, that Wilder had lost his fastball, that Wilder should get out of the sport, that time waits for no man, boxing's a young man's game, the sport's passed him by. I'm going to disagree with that. Let's talk about one of the biggest myths in sports, particularly boxing. The big myth is that the best fighter at any moment in time is the champion. Folks, that's not the case at all, right? Let me just say, I believe being champ in any sport really requires a lot of luck, a lot of right time, right place, right? Just because Buster Douglas was able to catch Mike Tyson and knock him down doesn't mean that Buster Douglas at that moment in time was the best man in the sport. Of course he was the champion because you beat the champ, that counts. But it doesn't mean he's the best in the sport at that time. Now maybe some champs are, right? Maybe Alexander Usyk is the best in the heavyweight division. Maybe he can beat everyone else. I would question that for every division. Styles make fights, right? Usyk might look dominant against some fighters, might not look dominant against others. The open question going into the rematch against Daniel Dubois is, how vulnerable is Usyk to body shots? Now that Dubois has gotten out of his coma, right, the one that he was in after Usyk hit the canvas, I have no idea how Usyk then gets off the canvas, even after a rest, and is able to encounter a lethargic Daniel Dubois in the closing rounds of that fight. Let's remember, that fight doesn't go the distance. But just understand, if you have a unique skill that allows you to beat perhaps better fighters, right? As Fabio Wardley just did to Justice Hooney. I'm working on the pronunciation, folks. You could rise to the top. So here we have Deontay Wilder. Let me offer an alternative version of history. Right? Is it possible that both Joe Parker and Zhilei Zhang are better than advertised? Right? I'm not saying either's perfect. Joe Parker lost to Dillian White. Even if you think that decision should have gone the other way, recognize that Parker did legitimately get dropped in that fight. Right? Zhilei Zhang, to me, he's still extremely dangerous. But there are questions on Zhilei Zhang's stamina, right? Had he finished strong against Philippe Bergovic, he wins that fight. Right? The Jerry Forrest fight, that's a total disaster for him. Right? And of course, there are questions about Zhilei Zhang's ability to take body shots. Was that Kabayel fight a bad night? Or is that a structural problem that Zhilei Zhang is going to have to guard against the next time he fights? I believe the big mistake that Deontay Wilder made was in the level of his opposition. And even then, let's be clear here, Martin Bakole did not go the distance against Joe Parker. Deontay Wilder did. whether or not you think he's outgunned. Right? He went the distance with Joe Parker. If you're able to go the distance with Joe Parker, you can jump in the ring with a world ranked heavyweight and have enough talent to last the distance. Most people can't. Let's ask a more disturbing question. Could Deontay Wilder ever beat Joe Parker? Right? Let's remember, Joe Parker himself was heavyweight champ at one point. I would argue we don't know. The fact that Deontay Wilder was a 5-year heavyweight champion doesn't tell us whether he could ever beat Joe Parker, who was a heavyweight champion for a shorter period of time, or Zhilei Zhang, who was never a heavyweight champion, but who is a silver medalist at the Olympics and who has always been a crafty southpaw. So make no mistake, Deontay Wilder is one of the hardest punches I've ever seen in years of watching boxing. I believe he's just one good shot away from beating some fighter who might be better than him. If he lands on Usyk, I would expect Usyk to hit the canvas. Right? I think just as Hune could do to Wilder what he did to Fabio Wardley, the fight might end the same. You might get to a later round, maybe round 10, and Hune might get caught. Right? Power's the last to go, folks. When they say Wilder's game is falling apart, what are they talking about? He's never been a defensive guru. I mean, you know, is it his boxing? Because prime Wilder was behind on the scorecards, at least my scorecards, for both Luis Ortiz fights. It's not like, you know, I'm watching Wilder and his hand speed looks off or anything like that. Age would catch up to Tyson Fury, a guy who is relying on coordination, you know, on an ongoing basis. Then it would catch up to, let's say, a Fabio Wardley or a Deontay Wilder, a guy who's relying on only being right once. Right? That Ortiz rematch, Ortiz looked well on his way to a victory. All he had to do was stay away from Wilder's right hand. I wouldn't even call Wilder particularly two-handed. Right? It's a Wilder right hand. All he had to do was stay away from Wilder's right hand. Even if he gets caught with the left, I would argue he could have taken the left. He couldn't do it. That's the secret to these big punchers. You're on the clock. Right? If you can stay away, you have a chance to win. The catch is trying to stay away for 10 or 12 rounds. I believe Wilder is going to win this fight against Tyrrell Herndon by stoppage. This is that rare fight where I'm going to fly unhedged and I'm going to rely on a stoppage. But I need for everyone here to understand the risk involved. That means Wilder could look great. I remember I had a bet like this on Vitaly Klitschko against Shannon Briggs. And Vitaly Klitschko looked great. He looked spectacular. But of course, Shannon Briggs was a gamer. Briggs would not go down. If that happens here, if Herndon, in the biggest fight of his career, decides, hey man, I'm blood and guts. Even if I'm behind on the scorecards, even if it's mathematically impossible for me to win this fight without a stoppage, this man is not going to knock me down. If this is his big moment, no matter how good Wilder looks, if there's no stoppage, you lose the bet. You lose it all. That's the risk we're taking. Let's talk about why I think Wilder, who hasn't won in a bit, who has multiple people in boxing saying he should hang it up. It's over for him. Let's talk about why I believe it's not only not over for Wilder, but I believe if Wilder just does the right matchmaking, if he doesn't put himself in there with a guy with ring coverage, that's who Joe Parker is, right? You see Parker, he's halfway across the ring, you think, wow, I'm safe. Suddenly something's hitting you on the side of the head. Isn't that the Bacoli fight? Because, of course, Parker's a cagey vet. He waits until the very end of the round to go for broke, knowing that if he misses the shot and if Bacoli catches him with a counter, all he has to do is beat the count to get a minute between rounds. Right? Understand, here, Wilder's not fighting a slick southpaw. Right? Keep in mind that second Joe Joyce fight, Zhilei Zhang drops Joyce off a right hand. Folks, there are too many layers. Right? If I were advising Deontay Wilder and they mentioned Zhilei Zhang's name, I'd say, whoa, southpaw with a right hand? By the way, go back to the Philippe Ergovic fight. Ergovic gets dropped off a right hand. And of course, we know from countless films that Zhilei Zhang can take you out with his left hand. Not only that, Zhilei Zhang is one of these guys who has great balance. So he can throw that big left and still be balanced. Right? Wilder didn't have a sport passed me by problem. He had a matchmaking problem. Here he's fighting a guy who got KO'd by Efe Ajagba in Ajagba's first fight. Here he's fighting a guy who is in the ring against Olympic silver medalist Richard Torres. This is after the Ajagba fight. This is the biggest fight of Tyrrell Herndon's career. And of course he gets KO'd in the second round. Right? Let's just say he didn't look like he knew how to survive. He didn't have great survival skills. This wasn't Fabio Wardley hugging Justice Hune. Right? Folks, there's some hugging going on in that Hune fight. Right? Wardley, and I know many of you disagree, Wardley looked out of shape to me. Right? He's not the first guy about to be a father who looks like he's missed some sleep, has other things going on in his life, may have been distracted from training. Right? Let me just tell you, I like to find out when a guy is having personal problems. Right? You know, Teofimo Lopez, for example. Right? You hear a guy's having problems with his marriage, Jamal Charlo. Right? And you hear the guy's feeling a little bit down. Folks, that impacts the guy when he's at work. For boxers, being at work is being in the ring. Right? So let's just say Fabio Wardley, I thought, couldn't handle Hune's hand speed. Couldn't handle the pace of the fight. He's up against the ropes. He has his back against the ropes more than Hune does. Well, let me just say, you know, Herndon to me looks limited. He looks protected. What do I mean by that? This is a guy who, if you research him, you'll learn he's had 5 fights in a row. 5. Against fighters on 4-fight losing streaks. Now, that's not total. I'm just talking about a streak of him fighting 5 guys with 4-fight losing streaks. Right, folks? Some guys have managers who know how to place them in good situations. Tyrrell Herndon does have a pretty good record. But understand, he's been stopped in the past not just by Ajaba, not just by Richard Torres, right? And both of those were early stoppages. But he also got stopped by a guy who had a losing record, right? So I don't see the survival skills here. I see a guy who, the knockouts aren't the Justice Hune variety, where Hune fights a great fight, but it's the second half of the 10th round. He makes one mistake, comes in the pocket a little bit too square, isn't moving his head, doesn't have a guard up, and pays for it. No, this is the guy getting dropped in the first round by Ajaba, in the second round by Torres. This is the guy getting caught early. I don't know how this guy goes the distance against Deontay Wilder. Right? I think Wilder's going to find a guy who doesn't have the survival skills, right? Who doesn't have the great defense, has fought a lot of guys on losing streaks. His last fight was the 6th-rounder. Piece it together, right? Wilder's a very tough matchup. I know we can look on film and we can say, wow, Wilder's feet look off. Wilder, doesn't look, defensively blessed. But Wilder's a tall guy. Wilder can hide that right hand, right? He comes out, there's a length dynamic to Wilder. He's pawing at you with that left hand, and you're far from him. It's hard to gauge distance. Wilder has ring coverage. You don't know that Wilder can actually reach you with power shots from the distance at which he throws them. Wilder's timing's also interesting, because you have guys who know Wilder wants to load up on a right hand, right? Audley Harrison, Dominic Brazil, right? They knew he was going to load up on a right hand, and yet they get hit with the right hand. Right? So let's just say Wilder, to me, is a hard puzzle to crack. Him losing the two guys who've been in the game for a long time. That's who Parker is. That's who Zhilei Zhang is. Right? Zhilei Zhang's in the limelight now, but this was a long time coming, folks. That Olympics that Zhang got the silver medal in, that's before the, let's just say that's years ago. That's several Olympics ago. Look it up. Right? So to me, Herndon doesn't have the level of experience those guys have. Isn't as crafty as those guys are. I've looked at films of him, and some of them are in my favorites folder. Right? I even have one of a stoppage he got. And even in that stoppage, against the guy who had a below 500 record, the guy he was fighting had his moments. I think Herndon is going to be out of his depth. Right? For him, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. He's going to be in there himself, trying to land a big shot. It's going to create openings for Wilder. I think Wilder gets the stoppage here. I think there are many men Wilder could fight, including ranked heavyweights, who he can beat. I do think Anthony Joshua is a better fighter than Deontay Wilder. But let's face it, we just saw a fight. Joshua Dubois, where Joshua got hit hard early and went down several times. Right? If Wilder lands early, Wilder could stop anybody, including Anthony Joshua. Understand how hard a puzzle this is to crack. He fought a guy who he sparred with a lot, Robert Helenius. Right? Helenius is interesting because Helenius is playing a cat and mouse game with him. Then Helenius gets his moment. He has Wilder over in the corner. Hellenius himself is one of the hardest punchers in the heavyweight division. Hellenius goes over there. He knows Wilder. He's been in the ring before with Wilder. He has Wilder in the corner. Wilder shortens up on what else? A right hand. Catches Hellenius. That's a fight. Right? So Wilder's complicated. Right? For lay people like us, we look at him, it seems like it's always a right hand. Right? Doesn't it? It seems like he's not defensively blessed. It seems like he can get caught. But yet, he's going the distance against Joe Parker. I think he beats Tyrrell Herndon. I'm going to fly naked here. I'm going to party like it's 2021. I like Wilder here by stoppage. I'm going to fly unhedged. What that means, the risk I'm taking, is that if Wilder looks great, like Vitaly did against Shannon Briggs, but the fight goes the distance, I'll lose it all. Let me hear from you. That's how I see this fight. Understand, Herndon must have great management. How's he fighting Efe Ajagba and Richard Torres? Right? But let me say this too. The fact that he's getting fights against Efe Ajagba, Richard Torres, and now Deontay Wilder tells you that there's something on film that indicates that this guy might have some talent. Right? Be aware of that as you take this risky bet, if you pursue it. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comments section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.